Beyata Hackborn. I am the set and props designer for Gifted Prints. From when I first started designing, my inspirations for even before this, my inspirations were usually taken from my background in children's musical theater, and my mom used to read me a lot of children's fairy tales when I was little, and her being my Chinese half. The fairy tales that she used to read us were some of the only kind of touchstones for her culture in a lot of ways. Children's fairy tale books and things I used to have this book of the Monkey King that was based on this 1960s animated film from China, and I used to read it over and over, and I was always really inspired by how colorful it was and how they depicted everyday things that we think of how we illustrate something in a Western way, completely different. So when you look at a mountain in a Western sense, it's very pointy and sharp, but when you look at a mountain in a Chinese storybook, it's very rounded and flowing. It's almost cloud-like, and similar in a lot of ways. They illustrate trees very differently, just by nature of their art origins. I've definitely taken a lot of that way of illustrating from the Chinese storybooks that I read as a kid into this design. A lot of the shapes that I play with are flowing in the design, a lot less angular. And there's also an understanding of layering of things. So my mom used to have these little cork dioramas that were carving little Chinese landscapes, and that you can see a lot of that inspiration in a lot of the design. We're layering the show portals that are sort of shoji screens in a Japanese inspiration, and then we have Chinese silhouettes of red pine trees and bamboo taken in front of it, and they're painted in a way that sort of make them look like cork carving. And a lot of the shapes in general are more flowing rather than angular, so that takes into account how Chinese people illustrate different mountains and clouds, and so there's a lot of these kind of mishmashes of a lot of time periods into a fantasy world of China, not as it historically is, but how it is in people's minds, kind of. Yeah, a lot of the architecture that I use in the show is based on Chinese architecture. I studied for research and preparation for this. I studied different Tang palaces of the era. So there's only illustrations and historical documents that we have. A lot of the ways that I've designed, there's a gate for the palace scene that is very a skeletal version of the traditional Chinatown gates that we see. It's fun to do a show that's never been done before, and specifically new musicals are usually of this scale too, or no one these days really seems to have the money or the ability to risk take like this. So I really appreciate being asked to do a show for the first time it's ever been fully realized. And it's nice to work in that kind of fluid space where it feels like everything's still possible, and this is the first time people are going to see this show. I mean, musicals in general, I feel they're their own genre of designing, in that there's usually a formula of you want show portals, you want trucks, you want flies. So if you split your design into those three categories, you can usually be okay, I want a show portal, and I just have to design what it looks like. So we had show portals in Legally Blonde, we have show portals in almost every musical we do. So a lot of this design was figuring out what are the pieces that the director wants to work with, what are those tricks in that bag that we want to pull out that musicals usually use. So there's an elevator, and what are we going to do with the elevator? Oh, but what if the elevator spins? What if it's like that? So it's choosing what kind of tools in the toolbox we want to use, and then my job is basically just figuring out what does it look like, and will it actually fit on stage? This show is definitely almost the opposite of Play That Goes Wrong, because we're working with not a formula. Play That Goes Wrong is tells you exactly what the set is going to be. It's going to be this is exactly what this gag is, and there's 100 YouTube videos about how people have done the gag in the past. This show is a lot of figuring out, does this script actually work in reality, and what needs to change to like make it physically possible. Like there's a lot of costume changes in the show. There's a lot of scene changes in the show, a lot of transitions, a lot of automation. There's a lot of things happening on stage. So the process of doing the show like this is more about how do you be flexible while still maintaining like the core of what you originally envisioned. Well, when I first go into design and I'm trying to approach what materials to use, usually it's in tandem with the technical director with what physically is possible with their carpentry shop and what is like in my mind as being the like correct material. So like with the cork carving intricacies and all the silhouettes that we play with, we had a hard time figuring out like how do we achieve these very organic shapes that are like 2D without wasting a lot of plywood, because of course when you cut a very curvy shape into a very square stock like piece of wood, you're wasting all of the offcut to it. So we bought a special heat bending material that's used for curving decking. So Theatre Calgary bought this thing to help us physically just buy strips and then we bend them to the shapes that we need to. So it saved us a lot on wood and wasteful offcuts and that kind of thing. And it also made it easier because you don't have to like jig every shape, every curve and everything like that. You can actually be more organic with the process because you're physically almost sculpting the wood as you work with it. Yeah, with the stone, I knew I wanted it to have more of a illustrative feel to it rather than like a realistic feel. So I took like 2D drawings and illustrations of what mountains and the kinds of rocks would sort of look like and what those formations were. And we gave them to our carver, Rob, and he basically like he took my reference and my sketch of what I wanted, and then he used his own artistic license to like carve out these specific shapes. So they're very like, a lot of this, like the tree that's back there is very 2D. Like part of the set is like to take a 2D thing and like luxuriate in how 2D and like slightly dimensional it is. Like we're not trying to go for realism with this design. It's more like, oh, that's so delightful. It's like a pop-up book. How long does it take to design a set like this? It depends on the set. Musicals tend to take longer because there's more locations you're dealing with. I would say for me about a month, between about like a week at least, a week and a half of like the conception phase, the meeting with designer or the director and other designers, deciding on what the aesthetic of the show will be, and then probably a week of gestating and like doing sketches and conceptualizing, and then about 2 weeks to draft the show and to do like the first drawings of what things will look like. And then you submit prelims, of course, and then you get costing, and then they can't afford it, and then and then you redesign the whole thing, which we didn't really do for this one. Theatre Calgary is actually very good at making good budget choices and like figuring out how to make a vision come true. They're very good at that. Yeah, so like about a month and a few weeks maybe. But of course it's like a long-term progress. Like I started this in the last summer, and I'm still like doing design edits like as we're going into tech, like as we're being like, oh, we can't afford that, or like, oh, we don't have enough time to install this, so we're working. It's like designing a set is like very much a process and flexibility.